I remember sitting in James Whitmore's office that Tuesday morning, watching his hands tremble as he reached for the manila folder on his desk. The leather chair beneath me was the same one I'd sat in 3 years earlier, when Robert's will was read, when my world first collapsed into grief so profound I could barely breathe. But this time, the trembling wasn't mine. It was James's. And somehow, that frightened me more than anything had in those 3 terrible years since my husband's death. "Margaret," he said, and his voice cracked on my name. "I need to show you something. I've struggled with this for months. I couldn't sleep. My wife finally told me I had to tell you that I couldn't protect Victoria anymore, that what she's done." He stopped, pressed his fingers against his closed eyes. "God forgive me, I should have told you sooner." I sat there in my sensible wool cardigan, the navy one with the small pearl buttons that Robert always said brought out my eyes, and felt my stomach turn to ice. James Whitmore had been our family attorney for 32 years. He'd handled Robert's business contracts, witnessed our living trust, celebrated with us at Victoria's law school graduation dinner. I'd never seen him cry. I was seeing it now. "James, you're scaring me," I whispered. My purse sat in my lap, the same black leather one I'd carried to Robert's funeral, now worn at the corners. My hands clutched it like a life raft. "What's happened? Is Victoria all right? Has something happened to my daughter?" He looked at me then, and the expression in his eyes was something I'd never forget. Pity mixed with such profound anger that it made him look like a stranger. "Your daughter lied to you, Margaret, about everything, and I helped her do it by staying silent." The morning had started ordinarily enough. I'd woken in the small cottage that Victoria insisted I rent after Robert died, the one-bedroom place 3 blocks from the ocean in the old part of town. Not the house Robert and I had shared for 43 years, the beautiful craftsman with the wraparound porch where we'd raised Victoria, where Robert had carried me over the threshold in 1978, where every room held memories layered like wallpaper. No, Victoria had explained, so patiently, so kindly, that the house had to be sold to pay Robert's debts. Medical bills, she'd said, the reverse mortgage he'd secretly taken out, business losses I hadn't known about. "Mom, Dad was proud," Victoria had told me, holding my hands in hers, her expensive perfume filling the air between us. "He didn't want you to worry, but the truth is there's almost nothing left. I've managed to salvage enough to get you this cottage, to set up a small allowance. But we have to be careful, we have to be smart." I'd believed her, of course I'd believed her. She was my daughter, my brilliant, accomplished daughter who'd built a real estate empire, who understood money and law and all the complicated modern things that bewildered me. I was just a retired third-grade teacher who'd spent 40 years teaching children to read, who'd never balanced anything more complex than our household checkbook, and even that Robert had usually handled. When he died, I felt like I'd been set adrift in an ocean where I couldn't read the stars. So I'd signed the papers Victoria brought me, trusting her explanations. I'd moved into this cottage with its thin walls and rattling windows, downsizing from a lifetime of possessions to what could fit in 800 square feet. I'd accepted the monthly allowance of $1,200 that appeared in my checking account like clockwork, grateful that Victoria was taking care of me, trying not to be a burden, trying to live modestly on what she said was all that remained. The phone call from James had come the previous afternoon. "Margaret, I need to see you immediately. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. Please don't mention this to Victoria." That last part had struck me as odd, even alarming. But I'd agreed, spent a sleepless night wondering what could be so urgent, so secretive. Now I sat in his office, watching him open that folder with shaking hands, and I knew my life was about to fracture again. 3 years ago, James began, his voice steadier now, as if he'd made some internal decision to push through. "When Robert died, he left you a substantial estate. The house alone, Margaret, do you know what's happened to property values on Coastal Drive? The development boom. Your house, Robert's house, is now worth $2.3 million. I stared at him, the numbers didn't make sense. They floated in the air like soap bubbles, impossible, unreal. But Victoria said there was a reverse mortgage, she said. There was no reverse mortgage. James pulled out a document, slid it across the polished desk. This is the title history. Robert owned that house free and clear. He'd paid off the mortgage in 2008. He was so proud of that, remember? He took you to Antonio's to celebrate. I did remember. Robert had ordered champagne, something we almost never did. He'd raised his glass and said, "Maggie, my love, our home is truly ours now. No bank can ever take it from us." We'd laughed about being old-fashioned, about achieving what our parents' generation took for granted. The memory was so vivid I could taste the champagne, slightly too sweet, bubbles tickling my nose. But then how? My voice sounded small, confused, like one of my former students struggling with a word they couldn't quite sound out. James pulled out more papers. His hands weren't shaking anymore. Now they moved with terrible purpose, building a case, laying evidence before me like a prosecutor. I suppose that's what he'd become, a prosecutor presenting the unthinkable truth. Robert also left you his retirement accounts. 3 separate IRAs, total value at the time of death, $893,000. There was a life insurance policy through his company, another $500,000. Plus savings, a stock portfolio, the proceeds from selling his boat and workshop tools. Margaret, Robert left you an estate worth approximately $3.8 million. The office seemed to tilt. I gripped the armrests of the chair, my knuckles white against the worn leather. 3.8 million. The number was absurd, impossible. I'd been eating store-brand soup for dinner, buying my clothes at the church rummage sale, refusing to turn the heat above 65 degrees all winter to save money. I'd sold my mother's pearl earrings last month to pay for a root canal, because I thought I couldn't afford the dental work on my limited budget. "That can't be right," I whispered. Victoria showed me papers. She explained about the debts, the medical bills from Robert's cancer treatment. Robert had excellent insurance. His out-of-pocket medical expenses were under $15,000, paid from savings. James's voice was gentle but relentless. "Margaret, I'm going to show you something now that's going to be very difficult. I need you to prepare yourself." He turned his computer monitor toward me. On the screen was a bank statement, but not one I recognized. The account holder name read Chen Family Trust, Margaret Chen, trustee. The balance showed $247,663. 42. "This is your money," James said. "Or rather, what's left of it in this particular account. Victoria has been systematically transferring your funds into accounts she controls. Look here," he scrolled down, highlighting entries. Monthly transfers of $50,000 to Victoria Chen Ashford Property Management. Only there is no property to manage. She's simply taking your money. My breath came in short gasps. The room felt too hot, too small. "But the allowance she gives me, the $1,200 each month, she said that was from your own funds." James pulled up another screen. "This is the primary trust account. Look at the monthly disbursements. On the first of every month, $1,200 transfers to your personal checking account. But look at this. On the same day, $43,000 transfers to Victoria's business account. Every single month for the past 3 years." I did the math automatically, a teacher's habit, drilled into me by decades of grading papers. $43,000 a month, 12 months, 3 years, over $1.5 million. My vision blurred. "There's more," James said quietly. "The house. Victoria didn't sell it to pay debts. She transferred it into her name using a quitclaim deed. Margaret, this is your signature on the deed." He showed me a document. "She forged my signature," I said. The words came out flat, emotionless, because my brain couldn't process what they meant. Victoria, my baby girl, the child I'd nursed through colic and chicken pox, whose hand I'd held on her first day of kindergarten, who'd cried in my arms when her college boyfriend broke her heart, that Victoria had forged my signature to steal my house. Not just once. James was methodical now, showing me document after document, quitclaim deeds, account transfer authorizations, trust amendments I'd never seen. Each one bore my forged signature, each one transferred assets out of my name and into Victoria's control. "When did you realize?" I asked. My voice sounded strange, distant, like it belonged to someone else. James leaned back in his chair, suddenly looking much older than his 64 years. "I suspected something was wrong about 6 months after Robert died. Victoria was rushing paperwork through, always saying you were too grief-stricken to meet with me directly, that she was protecting you from stress. At first, I thought she was being a good daughter. But then the property transfer happened, and something felt off. I requested to meet with you directly to confirm, and Victoria became aggressive. She threatened to move all your legal business to another firm. She implied there could be ethical complaints if I harassed you during your grief. He rubbed his face with both hands. I convinced myself I was wrong. Victoria was a successful attorney herself, well respected in the community. You were her mother, who wants to believe someone capable of that kind of betrayal, but it gnawed at me. I started keeping copies of everything, documenting the discrepancies. 6 months ago, my wife found me at 3 in the morning, going through files. I broke down and told her everything. She said I had to tell you, that every day I waited made me complicit. Why now? I asked. Why today? Because yesterday, Victoria filed paperwork to have you declared incompetent. James's voice broke again. She's petitioning for conservatorship, claiming you have dementia, that you can't manage your affairs. If she succeeds, she'll have complete legal control over everything, including the power to institutionalize you. The room spun. I gripped the desk edge, my fingernails digging into the wood. Institutionalize? I don't have dementia, I'm perfectly. I know that, Margaret. Anyone who spends 5 minutes with you knows that. But Victoria has been building a case. She has statements from her friends claiming they've witnessed you being confused. She has a doctor's assessment, though from a physician you've never actually seen, suggesting cognitive decline. It's all fabricated, all designed to give her complete control. I thought about the past 3 years. The way Victoria always spoke to me slowly, carefully, as if I were a child. How she'd pat my hand and say, "Don't worry about the complicated stuff, Mom. Just let me handle it." The times she'd visit and I'd mention something, a news story, a book I'd read, and she'd look at me with that patient, pitying expression. "Are you sure that happened, Mom? Sometimes our memories play tricks on us." She'd been gaslighting me. The term came from an article I'd read in the library during one of my long afternoons browsing magazines I couldn't afford to buy. The article had described how manipulators make their victims doubt their own reality, their own sanity. I'd read it with detached interest, never imagining it applied to my own life. "What do I do?" I asked. The question came out as a whisper. James straightened in his chair, and I saw something shift in his expression, from guilt and grief to determination. "We fight back. We expose what she's done. I've already contacted a criminal attorney, a friend who specializes in elder financial abuse. His name is David Park, and he's excellent. With your permission, we'll file a police report today. We'll freeze all the accounts Victoria has access to. We'll file for emergency orders to protect your remaining assets and void all the fraudulent transfers." "She's my daughter," I said, and my voice cracked on the word. That's what kept running through my mind, the one thought that rose above all the others like a drowning person gasping for air. She's my daughter. I made her breakfast on Saturday mornings, chocolate chip pancakes with extra chips because that's how she liked them. I sewed her Halloween costumes by hand, every year, whatever she wanted to be. I sat through every piano recital, every soccer game, every parent-teacher conference. I loved her with a love so fierce and complete that I would have died for her without hesitation. And she had stolen from me. Systematically, deliberately, over years. She had looked me in the eyes while I worried about money, while I counted pennies at the grocery store, while I sold my mother's jewelry, and she had said nothing. She had taken everything Robert worked for, everything he'd left to ensure I'd be cared for after he was gone, and she had stolen it for herself. "I know," James said softly. "Believe me, Margaret, I know what this means. But this isn't about punishment. This is about protection. If we don't act now, she'll succeed in having you declared incompetent. She'll put you in a facility somewhere, and you'll have no control over your own life. This is about your survival." I sat there for a long moment, feeling something hard and cold crystallize inside me. It felt like the moment Robert died, when the doctor said, "I'm sorry, there's nothing more we can do," and I realized I had to find a way to live in a world without him. That same terrible clarity was descending on me now. I had to find a way to live in a world where my daughter was not who I thought she was, where the love I'd given her, the trust I'd placed in her, had been answered with calculated cruelty. "Show me everything," I said. My voice was steady now. "I want to see all of it. Every document, every transfer, every lie. I need to understand exactly what she's done." For the next 2 hours, James walked me through it all. The paper trail was extensive, damning. Victoria had started small, transferring modest amounts in the first few months, perhaps testing to see if anyone would notice. When no one did, she'd grown bolder. The house transfer happened at the 8-month mark, executed through a title company where she'd apparently charmed the clerk into rushing the paperwork without proper verification. She'd sold the house 6 months later for $2. $1 million to a development company, coincidentally, one where she served on the board. The proceeds had vanished into a maze of LLC accounts, all ultimately controlled by her. She'd liquidated Robert's retirement accounts, paying massive early withdrawal penalties, apparently not caring because it wasn't her money being wasted. The life insurance had been the easiest. As the named beneficiary, she'd simply collected it and never mentioned it to me. In total, Victoria had stolen approximately $3.4 million. Some had funded her lifestyle, the vacation home in Aspen, the new Mercedes, the extensive remodel of her own house that she'd told me was financed through her business success. But most of it sat in accounts bearing her name, earning. "There's one more thing," James said as the meeting drew to a close. He pulled out a final document, this one looking more recent than the others. "I found this in the files last week. It's a power of attorney, supposedly signed by you 2 years ago, giving Victoria complete authority over your healthcare decisions, including end-of-life care." I looked at the signature, another forgery. "She could pull the plug on me," I said quietly. "If I were in the hospital, she could decide to end my life." "Yes," James said, "though let me be clear, that's speculation. I have no evidence she'd actually do that. But the document gives her the legal authority." I thought about Victoria's visits over the past 3 years. Once a month, like clockwork, usually on a Sunday afternoon. She'd arrive in her expensive car, wearing her designer clothes, carrying a bag of groceries. "Just some things I picked up for you, Mom, I know money's tight." She'd stay for an hour, maybe 90 minutes, checking her phone constantly, sighing when I tried to tell her about my week, about the book club at the library or the new family that moved in next door. I'd always felt like I was boring her, like I was the obligation she had to check off her list. Visit mother, done. I'd apologized for taking up her time, thanked her profusely for her generosity, tried to make the visits pleasant so she wouldn't dread them so much. All while sitting on furniture from Goodwill, in a cottage she'd moved me to after stealing my home, accepting her charity that was actually a tiny fraction of my own money. The rage that swept through me then was unlike anything I'd ever felt. It was clean and bright and sharp as a scalpel. It cut through the grief, through the shock, through the part of me that wanted to curl up and weep for the daughter I thought I had but apparently never did. What remained was clarity. "Let's file the police report," I said. "Let's do everything. I want her prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." James nodded, relief evident in his expression. "There's one thing you should know. This is going to become public. Victoria is prominent in this community. The media will cover it. Your privacy will be invaded. People will have opinions. It's going to be hard." Robert used to say something, I told him. When he faced difficult business decisions, when people pressured him to compromise his principles, he'd say, "The right thing is still the right thing, even when it's hard." This is hard, James. This is the hardest thing I've ever faced. But it's right. We spent another hour with David Park, the criminal attorney James had contacted. David was younger, maybe 45, with kind eyes and a methodical way of explaining things. He outlined what would happen next. The police report, the forensic accounting investigation, the likelihood of criminal charges for forgery, embezzlement, and elder abuse. He was honest about the challenges too. Victoria was an attorney. She'd have excellent legal representation. She might fight this for years. "But you have one advantage," David said. "The truth, the evidence is overwhelming." James documented everything. "Unless Victoria can somehow explain away millions in fraudulent transfers, the outcome isn't really in doubt. The question is how long she'll drag it out." I returned to my cottage that afternoon in a daze, the folder of evidence James had given me clutched against my chest. The cottage looked different now, not like a humble home but like a cage, a place I'd been manipulated into accepting. I walked through it, seeing it with new eyes. The cramped bedroom where I could barely fit my dresser. The kitchen with outdated appliances, and a refrigerator that ran so loud, I'd learned to sleep through the noise. The living room where I'd arranged my few remaining possessions, photographs of Victoria through the years, trying to make it feel like home. I took down the photographs, one by one. Victoria at age 5, gap-toothed and grinning, holding her first library card. Victoria at 12, serious in her piano recital dress. Victoria's college graduation, her law school graduation, her wedding to Marcus. Marcus, who divorced her 2 years ago after what Victoria called irreconcilable differences. I wondered now if he'd discovered what she was really like, if he'd seen the coldness beneath the polished surface. I put all the photographs in a box and closed the lid. Then I sat at my small kitchen table and did something I hadn't allowed myself to do since Robert died. I cried. Not the quiet, dignified tears I'd shed at his funeral, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere primal. I cried for my husband, who'd worked so hard to provide for me, only to have his legacy stolen. I cried for myself, for 3 years of poverty and worry that had been completely unnecessary. But most of all, I cried for the daughter I'd loved, the one I'd believed in, who I now realized might never have existed at all. The police came the next day. 2 detectives, one older woman with gray-streaked hair and a gentle manner, one younger man who took notes. They recorded my statement, examined the documents, asked careful questions. The older detective, whose name was Sarah Chen, no relation, she assured me with a sad smile, had handled elder abuse cases before. This is one of the most extensive I've seen, she told me. Most financial abuse of the elderly involves caregivers or distant relatives. Cases where the abuser is an adult child are particularly painful, but the good news is they're also usually easier to prosecute. The family relationship makes the betrayal of trust clear. They arrested Victoria 3 days later. I didn't witness it, but I heard about it. The whole town heard about it. Victoria Chen Ashford, prominent real estate developer and attorney, led out of her office in handcuffs. The local newspaper ran the story on the front page. Local attorney charged with embezzling millions from elderly mother. She called me that night from jail. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up the phone. Mom. Her voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the fear underneath. Mom, this is insane. You have to tell them this is all a misunderstanding. Tell them you gave me permission to manage the money. Tell them. Did I give you permission to forge my signature? I asked quietly. Did I give you permission to sell my house and keep the money? Did I give you permission to make me live in poverty while you took vacations in Aspen? You don't understand business, Mom. You never did. I was protecting those assets, investing them, growing them. I was going to take care of you eventually when you were really old and needed help. This way, there'd be more for both of us. I am really old, Victoria. I'm 68 years old. Your father died 3 years ago. I needed help then. Instead, you stole from me. I didn't steal. That money was family money. It should have been mine anyway. Dad always favored you, always acted like you were so special. I built a successful career, I made something of myself, and what did he leave me? Nothing directly, everything in trust for you. Like I was some kind of irresponsible child who couldn't be trusted. There it was, finally, the truth underneath all the lies. Resentment, entitlement, the belief that she deserved Robert's money more than I did. That my 43 years as Robert's wife, my partnership in building the life he'd provided for, counted for nothing compared to her success. Your father loved you completely, I said, my voice breaking. Everything he did was for you. He worked 60-hour weeks for 30 years so you could have piano lessons and summer camps and a college education without debt. He was so proud of you, Victoria. He bragged about you to anyone who would listen. And he left his estate to me because spouses take care of each other. That's what marriage means. He trusted that I would make sure you were provided for if you ever needed help. Instead, you stole from both of us. I didn't. You can't. Mom, please tell them to drop the charges. I'll pay it all back. I'll give you whatever you want, please. What I want, I said slowly, is for you to face the consequences of what you've done. What I want is justice for your father, whose life's work you squandered. What I want is for you to understand that love and trust are not things you can steal. I hung up. She called back immediately. I didn't answer. She called 17 more times that night. I unplugged the phone. The legal process was exactly as grueling as David Park had warned. Victoria pleaded not guilty, hired an expensive defense team, and prepared to fight. Her attorneys tried everything, attacking the authenticity of the documents, questioning my competence to make the accusations, suggesting I was being manipulated by James and David. They painted Victoria as a devoted daughter who'd made innocent mistakes in complex financial management, but James's documentation was thorough. Forensic accountants traced every transfer, every forged signature. Handwriting experts confirmed the forgeries. The title company clerk who'd processed the house sale admitted, under questioning, that Victoria had pressured her to rush the paperwork and skip standard verification procedures. The doctor who'd written the cognitive decline assessment confessed that Victoria had paid him $5,000 for the report and that he'd never actually examined me. The case began to collapse. Victoria's attorneys pushed for a plea deal. The prosecutor offered one. Victoria would plead guilty to multiple felonies, serve 3 years in prison, pay full restitution plus damages, and accept a permanent restraining order prohibiting contact with me. She would also be disbarred, losing her law license forever. Victoria rejected it. She wanted probation, community service, anything but prison. She couldn't imagine herself, a successful professional, wearing an orange jumpsuit like a common criminal. Her attorneys went back to the prosecutor with counteroffers, each one rejected. Finally, a trial date was set. I dreaded the trial. The thought of sitting in a courtroom, listening to Victoria's attorneys attack my character, reliving every painful detail of her betrayal, it felt unbearable. But I also knew I had to do it. For Robert, for myself. For every other elderly person being victimized by someone they trusted. The trial lasted 6 days. The prosecution presented their case methodically, building an overwhelming wall of evidence. They showed the forged signatures, the fraudulent transfers, the pattern of systematic theft. They called James to testify about Victoria's threats and deceptions. They called the forensic accountants who traced the money. They called me. I sat in the witness box, looking out at a courtroom full of strangers and reporters, and told my story. Victoria's attorney cross-examined me aggressively, trying to paint me as confused, bitter, vindictive. But I wasn't confused. I had loved my daughter completely, and she had betrayed me utterly. There was no confusion in that, only clarity and pain. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. They found Victoria guilty on all counts. 22 felonies including forgery, grand theft, embezzlement, and elder abuse. At sentencing, the judge, a woman about my age with steel gray hair and fierce eyes, addressed Victoria directly. "You held a position of trust," the judge said. "As an attorney, as an officer of the court, you were bound by ethical obligations. As a daughter, you were bound by love and family duty. You violated all of it. You systematically stole from your own mother while she grieved your father. You forged documents. You fabricated medical reports to have her declared incompetent. The depth of your betrayal is stunning. This court sentences you to 7 years in state prison, full restitution of $3.4 million plus interest and damages, and permanent loss of your law license." Victoria's face crumpled. She looked at me across the courtroom, her eyes pleading, as if I could somehow make this all go away with a word. As if I could be the mother I'd always been, who kissed her scraped knees and told her everything would be okay. I looked back at her steadily. Then I stood and walked out of the courtroom. The house on Coastal Drive had been held in a trust pending the trial's outcome. With Victoria's conviction, it reverted to me. I returned to it on a gray morning in October, 4 years almost to the day after I'd been forced to leave it. The new owners, the development company had sold it to a young family, had been kind about the situation, accepting a settlement that allowed me to buy it back at the original sale price plus their renovation costs. I walked through rooms I'd thought I'd never see again. The kitchen where Robert and I had shared 43 years of morning coffee. The bedroom where Victoria had been conceived, where Robert had died in my arms, whispering that he loved me. The living room where we'd hosted countless Christmas mornings, birthday parties, ordinary evenings. The young family had taken good care of it, but it wasn't the same. They'd knocked down a wall, updated the kitchen, painted over the soft blue Robert had loved. It would take work to make it mine again. But it was possible. Everything was possible now. With the restitution money, I was financially secure for the rest of my life. But I didn't want a big house anymore, not without Robert, not without the family I'd thought I had. I sold the house again, this time on my own terms, for $2.5 million. I bought a smaller cottage, still by the ocean, still filled with light, and used the rest to establish something I'd been dreaming about since the trial ended. The Robert Chen Memorial Scholarship Fund for underprivileged students pursuing teaching careers. Robert had always valued education, had always supported my work as a teacher. He would have loved this, would have been proud. The fund would give full scholarships to 10 students each year, covering tuition, books, and living expenses. Students who wanted to teach but couldn't afford the education. Students who would go into classrooms and shape young lives the way I had for 40 years. I attended the first scholarship ceremony, watching 10 bright-eyed young people accept their awards. They gave speeches about their dreams, their determination to make a difference. One young woman, Maria, cried as she talked about being the first in her family to go to college. Watching her, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy that had nothing to do with my own life, and everything to do with someone else's future. Victoria served 5 years before being released on parole. I heard about it through David Park, who'd stayed in touch. She'd been a model prisoner, he said, had taken college courses, had apparently found religion. She'd written me letters from prison, dozens of them. I'd returned them all unopened. I didn't want her apologies. I didn't want her explanations. Some betrayals are too deep for words to bridge. She tried to contact me again after her release. A letter arrived at my new cottage, forwarded from my old address. I held it for a long time, feeling its weight, knowing that inside was probably an appeal to the mother she thought I still was. The mother who would forgive anything, who would welcome her home with open arms. But that mother had died. She died in James Whitmore's office 4 years earlier, when the truth shattered the illusion of the daughter she'd loved. What remained was a different woman, harder, wiser, alone but not lonely, scarred. On my 70th birthday, the scholarship fund held its second annual ceremony. 20 students now, thanks to a generous donation from James Whitmore, who'd been so moved by the first ceremony that he'd added his own money to the fund. The local newspaper covered it, a much different story than the one they'd run about Victoria's arrest. Retired teacher transforms personal tragedy into educational legacy, the headline read. They interviewed me for the article. The reporter was young, earnest, reminded me of students I'd taught. She asked about Victoria, about whether I'd forgiven her. Forgiveness isn't something you give away like a gift, I told her. It's something you earn through genuine repentance and change. My daughter showed me who she really was when she thought no one was watching. That's the truth I choose to believe. Do you ever miss her? The reporter asked. I thought about that question for a long time. Did I miss the daughter who'd drawn me Mother's Day cards with careful crayons? The girl who'd run into my arms after school, chattering about her day? The young woman who'd asked my advice about her career, her relationships, her dreams? I miss the daughter I thought I had, I finally said. But I don't think that daughter ever really existed. What I miss is an illusion. I don't miss the reality. The article ran with a photograph of me standing with the scholarship recipients, 20 young people with their whole lives ahead of them. In the photo, I'm smiling, genuinely smiling, not the careful, fragile smile I'd worn for years after Robert died. The woman in that photograph has survived betrayal and emerged stronger. She has transformed her pain into something meaningful. That's the woman I've become. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about Victoria. I wonder if she understands what she destroyed. I wonder if she lies awake remembering the mother who loved her unconditionally and feels the weight of what she threw away. But mostly, I don't wonder about her at all. I think instead about the students whose lives will be changed by the scholarship fund. I think about the teachers they'll become, the children they'll inspire. I think about Robert, and how proud he would be of what his legacy has become, not money sitting in accounts, but opportunity spreading outward like ripples in water, touching lives he'll never meet. This is my revenge, if you can call it that. Not destroying Victoria's life, though I suppose I did that too. My real revenge is living well, building something beautiful from the ruins of betrayal. Refusing to let her actions make me bitter or small or afraid. I am 70 years old. I live in a cottage by the ocean. I volunteer at the library, helping children learn to read. I have friends, a community, a life filled with purpose. Every year the scholarship fund grows. Every year, more students get the chance at an education they couldn't otherwise afford. And Victoria. Victoria is somewhere out there, living with the consequences of her choices. She lost her career, her reputation, years of her life, and the love of her mother. She gained nothing that lasted, nothing that mattered. The money she stole is gone, returned to its rightful purpose. The power she craved dissolved in the face of truth. I used to believe that being a good mother meant unlimited forgiveness, endless second chances, love without boundaries. Victoria taught me differently. She taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's cruelty. Sometimes justice is more important than peace. Sometimes walking away is the only healthy choice. These are hard lessons, learned at terrible cost. But they're true nonetheless. I don't know if Victoria thinks about me. I don't know if she has moments of genuine regret, or if she still believes she was justified, that she was the victim of circumstance and unfair judgment. It doesn't matter. Her internal life is no longer my concern. What matters is this: I survived. I found my way through the darkness to a life that has meaning and joy. I honored Robert's memory not by clinging to the past, but by building a future that reflects his values. I transformed victimhood into purpose. If you're listening to this story because you've faced similar betrayal, because someone you trusted has stolen from you, or manipulated you, or used your love as a weapon, I want you to know that survival is possible. More than possible. You can emerge from betrayal stronger, clearer, more certain of your own worth. Trust yourself. Document everything. Seek help from people who have no stake in maintaining harmful relationships. And understand that setting boundaries, demanding justice, refusing to accept mistreatment, none of that makes you cruel or unloving. It makes you strong. I am Margaret Chen. I'm 70 years old. I'm a widow, a retired teacher, a survivor of family financial abuse. I'm also the founder of a scholarship fund that will send hundreds of students to college over the coming decades. I'm a woman who chose truth over the comfortable lie, justice over false peace. And I'm finally, after everything, free. The ocean outside my window keeps its eternal rhythm, and I keep mine. Some days are hard. Some nights, I dream of the daughter I thought I had and wake with tears on my face. But then morning comes. The sun rises over the water. The scholarship students send me thank you notes and graduation announcements. Life continues, rich with possibility. I didn't choose what Victoria did to me, but I chose how I responded. I chose to fight back, to reclaim what was mine, to transform pain into purpose. That choice, that response, that was my power. That was my victory. And it's a victory no one can ever steal.